Hello, we are now in midsummer and hopefully you are reaping the rewards of your hard work with regards to your food growing. Whether that be beetroot, carrots, spinach, cabbage, cucumber, blueberries starting to ripen, or whether you're waiting for your huge crop of peaches to swell. They do tend to increase in size towards their sort of readiness date, if you will, but goodness gracious me, look at that crop. Or waiting for your grapes. So it is generally much easier to have some food to eat from the garden or the allotment at this time of year and the autumn as well. But of course, when one gets into January, February, March time, it's not quite as easy. But if one lays the groundwork now, there can be plenty of produce to pick at that time of year. And quite often you really do appreciate fresh veg, etc. from the garden or the allotment in the winter time far more than at this time of year. I seem to anyway, because one knows that it's generally much harder to come by. And in my opinion, it's more challenging as a gardener to be partially self-sufficient or self-sufficient in whatever during the colder months than it is at this time of year, because at this time of year you can generally grow most things or have them on the way, but certainly with the right groundwork laid, one can do well during the colder months. So some of you may have seen the last video I put up, which was a harvest video that I made at my allotment. Harvested lots of things, I was very satisfied with it. So you may have remembered seeing some of the potatoes that I'm growing. So I've got a vast area of potatoes down there. In fact, I've got 2 areas of potatoes. Put quite a lot in, I'm expecting a good crop. Now what I want is some plug plants ready for putting into that ground when the potatoes come out, probably September, October time, a bit earlier in the case of the first and second earlies, probably about 2 or 3 weeks before the majority of those are ready. But either way, I will have some vacant ground. So what you want to do is utilise plugs, get them growing now whilst it's warm, the day lengths are nice and long, get some good growth, and then what you can do is transplant them, leave them there and let them get a good size before around November time, when the day lengths get short and the temperature drops and thus stops plant growth altogether, or indeed certainly slows it down anyway. So preparation is key here with regards to being self-sufficient or partially self-sufficient in whatever you want to be during the colder months. Even if you're not going for any form of sufficiency, you're just going for a bit of fun, it is nice to be able to harvest something you've grown in the colder months. So the other day I made a video what you can sow during the month of July, and you've just seen some of these seedlings here that have come up already. So these were planted on the 4th of July, so a happy 4th of July to all of my US viewers. But you can see in 5 days just how quickly these have germinated. The beetroot, the chard, the oriental greens, the cabbages, the lettuce that I sown, what else? So plenty here. And it's one of the benefits of planting at this time of year. It's warm and the days are just long and things germinate so readily. So certainly a great time to get your plants going. So the other day I mentioned planting dwarf beans. So this is variety Speedy, and it's one of the quickest beans to produce pods. So if you put them in, you should be getting some dwarf beans to eat within, say, 10 weeks or so, give or take a bit, but very much worth planting these now. So I like to use multi-purpose compost for the majority of my seed planting. So this cell tray is a nice size. There is 20 cells in this tray here. It's good to wash these before you use them in case you've got any slugs or snails, eggs, etc. on them, or indeed anything else undesirable that you do not want to eat your resulting crops. So anyway, what you do is you just get some multi-purpose compost like this, and I like to have my compost already in a bucket like this. If I had let's say kept my polytunnel more orderly, I would have had more space to have had this sort of raised up on a bench or something, so that I didn't have to get down to it like this. But we have to make the best of the situation we are in, don't we? So what we do is we just push in like this, And with many of my sort of, or the majority actually of what I grow, I like to push it in, so it's relatively firm like that. You don't need to go, you know, hammer it in and anything like that, but just like that is absolutely brilliant. So right here I'm setting some golden chard leaf beet, and I just put 1 seed per cell tray, or indeed per cell in the cell tray. I then put my tag on, and I like to write the date, what I've grown and the variety. So 9th of July, golden chard leaf beet. I then put some multi-purpose compost over the top. Hopefully they'll germinate within 5 days or so, like the other things I planted. So when I'm bringing on seedlings, I like to have them elevated above the ground like this. If they're on the ground, it's much easier for slugs, snails, rodents, etc. to cause damage, eat them. If they're above the ground, elevated like this, thinning out is nice and easy. You can see what you're doing. You can see if things aren't going so well, or maybe you need to stick another seed in somewhere because one cell tray hasn't germinated or whatever. Watering is nice and easy up here with a nice light watering can, good for one's lower back, so to speak. Now of course, if one doesn't have a polytunnel or a greenhouse, this is a relatively large polytunnel. It's about 6 meters by 3, which is about 20 feet by 10 feet, but you can get little grow houses which are brilliant, so like this sort of size, and with like a polytunnel cover over the top, and you could use something like that. So certainly plenty of ways of doing it, and one great thing about germinating them at this time of year is you don't have to do it on indoor window sills where they quite often go leggy during the colder months, whereas here got a nice bit of light, nice bit of warmth. Keep them nicely watered, use rainwater if possible, I do anyway, and hopefully you'll have some nice seedlings come up in a very short space of time. So you may remember the other day I straight sowed some seeds here. So turnips, variety snowball, I got autumn king carrots, and I also planted French breakfast radishes. So the radishes should be ready relatively quickly. These all went in on the 4th, and turnips there went in on the 2nd. So certainly done very well indeed. The radishes could be ready in 3 or 4 weeks or so, so that's very, very good indeed. The turnips germinated quickly as well, as I expected. The carrots are a bit on the drag, but that's quite often just how it goes, you know. So there we are. So if you've got a patch like this, or whatever size, whatever, if it's just, you know, half or less than half of this, get planting. You'll be glad you did. Something like turnips, you could be eating them in 3 months or so. So very much a great thing to do is to get planting right now. So down here you can see I've got some courgettes. So these are variety Verde d'Italia, which I would have planted initially around early April time, but I planted them out here only the other day on the 4th of July. So you could see that they're looking very pale in colour, quite unhealthy, but they're starting to look better. They looked a lot worse than this when I first planted them out here. So these were sort of an overspill, if you will, from the vast amount of plants that I planted. I'm very grateful to have these. Quite often as gardeners we grow too much and we don't have space at the time for something, but when I cleared this bed I had some available space, and I looked at these plants that were sort of hanging around, if you will, and I planted them out. I've also got Uchikikuri squash, I think that's how you say it, which I initially planted on the 14th of the 4th, and that went out on the 4th of July. And I've got some Bennings green tint patty pan squash, which planted initially on the 25th of April. So, oh, and some cucumbers there, Market More, which once again went out here on the 4th of July. So we'll see how this all does, and at the end of the day they've got 2 chances. They can now get some nice nutrients now they're in the bed, and the rain that we've been having is absolutely brilliant for them. So we'll just see how they do, and this can be a good way of extending the growing season, the fruiting production season of things like courgettes, squashes, cucumbers, etc., because you're planting them out a little bit later. So hopefully you'll get your other ones, then when they're finished you'll still get these. But of course we could be getting cold weather when these are fruiting later in the year, but we'll see how they do, and I'm expecting at least some crop from them. So there we are. Hope you've enjoyed that video. So wanted to get over the importance of planting now, so to keep yourself going during the less favourable times of year with regards to weather and food production. Very important thing, you know. Anyway, if you like my work, please feel free to like, share and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next video, which will more than likely be an allotment video. Thanks very much for viewing, and enjoy whatever it is you are doing.